The moment my daughter cried her first breath, my family gave my newborn daughter a knitted hat and shirt with the hand-embroidered words, "The mistake." That gift officially cut off my relationship with my family members, the people I used to call dad, mom, and little sister. But why did they treat me like this? And what did I do to protect my daughter? Follow this story, and you'll be surprised by what happened in my family. Hi everyone, I'm Brandon, 32, living with my wife Mia and our 3-year-old daughter Harper in Chicago. I work as a financial director for a real estate company, and our little family moved here 3 years ago, after I witnessed the cruelty my parents and sister showed toward my daughter. Even though 3 years have passed, in my memory, everything feels like it happened yesterday. We were still living and working in Miami, where I was born and raised. I remember that day clearly, August 18, 2022, when my daughter cried her first cry at 5 a.m. at the hospital. The joy when the doctor first placed Harper in my arms can't be said. She only weighed about 7 pounds, tiny but perfect in every way. Looking into her wide-open eyes, I whispered, "Hello, sweetheart. I'm Brandon. I'm gonna spend my whole life protecting my princess." Then I turned to hug Mia, my fantastic wife who'd just gone through 14 hours of labor. We both got lost in happiness knowing Mia had safely delivered Harper. With Harper's arrival, we felt like a perfect family. The future seemed filled with bright and happy things. We'd planned everything: a soft pink room for Harper, weekend picnics in the park, and annual beach trips. At 6 a.m., unable to contain my joy, I immediately called both parents to share the good news. Over the phone, my parents said excitedly, "We'll come to the hospital right away to meet our granddaughter." Mia's parents expressed similar joy and said they'd visit Harper at the hospital immediately. 30 minutes later, Mia's parents, Raymond and Betty, arrived. 3 days earlier, they'd flown from Chicago to Miami after I told them Mia only had a few days left before the baby was born. They'd been staying at a hotel near the hospital and regularly came to take care of Mia. As soon as they walked into the postpartum care room, with bright smiles, Betty came over to gently hug Mia and said, "Sweetie, congratulations." After that, Raymond walked to the bedside, looked at Harper sleeping in Mia's arms with loving eyes, and said, "My precious granddaughter, you're so adorable." In that moment, I felt the genuine love that my in-laws had for Harper and Mia. I took out my phone and recorded this warm moment. Betty and Raymond didn't come empty-handed. They brought a small pink blanket embroidered with Harper's name and a cute newborn outfit set. Their gifts were simple but full of love. While holding his granddaughter, Raymond turned to me and said with deep emotion, "Brandon, look at this. She's so beautiful, and she looks just like her mom. I'm proud of you and Mia." The warmth and sincerity from my in-laws made me feel really lucky. They'd accepted me like their son and welcomed Harper with all their love. At that moment, I hoped that when my parents arrived, they'd also love Harper and Mia, the way Raymond and Betty had. I hoped for that because the relationship between my family and Mia wasn't excellent. Before, my parents disapproved of my marriage to Mia. But I loved Mia, and I went against their wishes. After we got married, whenever we had the chance to meet, my parents always acted cold toward Mia. They rarely spoke directly to her, often acting like she didn't exist. That hurt me, but I still hoped they'd change someday. I used to think that even if they didn't love Mia, Harper was still their granddaughter, and I believed my parents would love Harper. But like people say, life sometimes shows us the most unbelievable things from the people we love most. And my story is living proof of that. Around 8 a.m., my parents, Donald and Marion, and my sister Anna showed up at the postpartum care room where Mia and Harper were cared for. Mia had just woken up from a short nap when they walked in. She tried to smile and welcome my parents, even though she knew they'd never really liked her. My parents quickly walked over to the baby crib. With what I thought was a sincere smile at the time, my mom bent down to look at Harper. And I, once again, took out my phone to record everything. I wanted to preserve these memories so when Harper grew up, she'd have memories of the first day she met her grandparents. Suddenly, my mom turned to my dad and nodded, like she was signaling for a plan they'd discussed beforehand. My dad immediately opened the bag they'd brought and took out 2 carefully wrapped gifts. Seeing the gifts, I felt happy because they cared about my daughter. But what happened next left me speechless. First, they pulled out a knitted hat and quickly put it on Harper's head. The words embroidered on the hat read, "The mistake." I felt like a boulder had dropped on my head when I saw those words. My in-laws, wife, and I froze in that situation. But the worst wasn't over yet. Right after that, my sister brought out a small white t-shirt, and this time, The words "the mistake" were embroidered on the chest. Like waking up from a daze, I screamed, "What the hell are you doing?" My face was red with anger, and my hands shook from the rage building up. Right after that, I rushed over and quickly picked up Harper. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law promptly stepped forward, pulled off the knitted hat, and threw it at my mother's face. My father-in-law, Raymond, also quickly stepped forward to stand before my parents, his large frame like a protective wall for us. As for Mia, even though she was exhausted after giving birth, she also got out of bed. Betty immediately held Harper for me so I could run over to help Mia. Breathing heavily, Mia approached my mother and asked, "Mom, why did you do this?" That question was like a plea, not because Mia herself was hurt, but because our daughter, an innocent newborn, had been treated like a mistake. My mother now showed no remorse. Instead, she held her head high and said bluntly, "Because of her, my son has changed. She's not worthy of him." Now I couldn't hold back anymore. I yelled, "Mom, enough. Everyone get out of here now. If not, I'll call security." My father stepped forward, looking at me angrily, and asked, "You dare kick us out?" My sister Anna also jumped in, her voice full of indignation. "Are you kicking out your own family?" Before I could answer them, Raymond approached my father and said harshly, "Get out of here. From now on, my daughter won't call you parents anymore." Raymond's words were like a sharp blade, cutting all the thin threads of connection left between the two families. The hospital room suddenly became suffocating with a tense atmosphere. Right after that, I pressed the call button for the nurse. Less than a minute later, a young nurse appeared, her face worried when she saw the tense situation in the room. I asked her to call security and have my parents escorted out of the hospital. My mother said, "No need to call security. I'll leave myself." Before stepping out the door, my mother asked me, "Do you know why I gave those gifts?" I just stood there looking at her without responding. A few seconds later, she slowly continued, "Because you're a failure. A failure's child is also a failure." The moment that venomous statement ended, a cold feeling ran down my spine. I realized the harsh truth. The woman who gave birth to me was deliberately trying to hurt my innocent newborn daughter. In the room, everyone was shocked by that cruel statement. Mia, despite having just gone through childbirth, had gone pale, lips trembling and eyes welling up. Betty stood next to Harper, protecting her granddaughter like a mother lion, her eyes full of anger and horror. Raymond stood frozen, his face darkened with anger, hands clenched into fists, ready to protect our little family at any cost. The nurse standing at the room door was also stunned. She'd never witnessed such a scene in her entire career. A grandmother calling her newborn grandchild a mistake. Not giving her a chance to say more, I screamed, "Get out, and never come back here again." After my yell, their figures gradually disappeared behind the door, leaving us frozen after what had happened. The room fell silent, only Harper's soft crying breaking the heavy atmosphere. I turned back to hug Mia, who was trembling and crying in my arms. Betty held Harper tight. Raymond stood by the window, his eyes sadly looking into the distance. That was the moment I knew our lives would never be the same. A line had been drawn, and none of us could go back. After they left, it took 5 minutes for everything to return to normal. Mia's parents and Mia took turns holding Harper, trying to ease the tension that had just occurred. As for me, I sat in the waiting chair in the hallway, my mind spinning with old memories surfacing, explaining my mother's actions. Before, I was someone who always lived under my family's control. Since childhood, every decision in my life was arranged by my parents, from studying, friends, to extracurricular activities. My parents always wanted me to become the ideal model they had drawn up, not the real person I was. My childhood was full of memories of being forced to take talent classes I didn't like, being compared to other kids, and always having to try to get perfect scores to please my parents. When I turned 18, things got even worse. I was passionate about technology and wanted to study computer science at a prestigious university that had accepted me. But my family stopped me. They wanted me to study finance, follow my father's path, and if I didn't listen, they'd disown me and cut off all financial support. In the end, I gave in and studied finance. I graduated with excellent grades, but deep inside, I always felt like a part of me had been lost. After graduating and starting work with an income, I stopped letting my parents interfere in my affairs. However, they still tried to interfere sometimes, and what they interfered with most was my marriage. My family always wanted me to marry Jenna, the daughter of my father's acquaintance. Their family was wealthy, owning hotels and rental resorts. In my parents' eyes, Jenna was perfect, beautiful, rich, and from a family with social status. But I went against their wishes. I fell in love with and married Mia, an ordinary girl who didn't come from a wealthy family, but who made me feel loved and respected. Mia gave me the happiness I'd never had, and we fell in love from the first meeting. Despite my parents' fierce opposition, Mia and I got married anyway. And from that day, conflicts in the family began to appear. My parents always tried to cause trouble with Mia, from criticizing how she dressed to how she cooked to how she decorated the house. Nothing was good enough in their eyes. And whenever Mia wasn't around, my parents always called me a failure. They said I was stupid for refusing to marry a well-off girl like Jenna, only to marry Mia, who in their eyes was just an ordinary girl with nothing special. Those unpleasant memories kept surfacing, and that day, when my daughter had just been born a few hours ago, they heartlessly mistreated my child. At that moment, I realized it was time to end it all. I couldn't let my daughter grow up in a toxic environment where she was called a mistake from the moment she was born. And this time, I decided to give them a lesson they'd never forget for the rest of their lives. And to carry out my plan, I needed Mia to fully recover after giving birth to Harper. A week after the incident, when Mia fully recovered and came home with Harper, I asked my wife to increase the rent on the house where my parents and sister lived. Mia owned that house. My parents had rented it back in January 2019. At that time, Mia and I had only been dating for a year. When they knew I needed to find a rental house for my parents in Miami, Mia revealed she had a 3-bedroom home that needed renting. The market rent at that time was $1,800. But Mia only charged $1,000 per month, partly because I was her boyfriend, and partly because she wanted to help my parents reduce costs since they were getting older. However, I suggested Mia rent to my parents through a brokerage company. I wanted to protect Mia from unnecessary troubles, because I knew if my parents found out Mia owned the house, they might demand to live there for free. And they'd been living there for almost 4 years, at $1,000 per month, never having any rent increase. Even though Miami's real estate market had risen significantly during that time, my parents often praised the landlord as a good person, not knowing it was Mia, the person they'd poorly treated for years. Mia hesitated when I mentioned increasing the rent or taking back the house. Sitting on the living room sofa with Harper sleeping in the crib beside us, Mia looked at me worriedly and said, "I don't know if this will make the family conflicts worse." I took Mia's hand with determination, looking straight into her eyes, and explained, "Mia, you saw what they did to our daughter. They called Harper a mistake. Can you imagine what they'll say to her when she grows up? I can't let that happen." Mia was silent for a moment. Then in a gentle voice, she asked, "What are you planning to do?" I sighed, then continued, "I want to raise the rent to market rate. If they don't accept it, they can move out. This isn't about money, it's about boundaries. I want them to know their actions have consequences." Hearing my words, Mia looked at Harper sleeping peacefully, then turned back to me. With new determination, she nodded and said, "I agree. We have to protect Harper." Right after that, I hugged Mia, feeling relieved. I knew this wasn't an easy decision for her, but we understood it was necessary. Then we sat down and calculated the new rent amount. Ultimately, we decided to increase the rent to $2,500 per month, starting from January 2023, when the current lease ended. It was a difficult but necessary decision. We knew this might cause a strong reaction from my parents, but we were ready to face it. That same afternoon, we left Harper with Mia's mother to babysit and went together to the real estate brokerage office to handle the paperwork. The broker, a middle-aged man named Jake, had worked with Mia for a long time, managing her rental property. He was surprised to see us show up without an appointment. When we explained the purpose of our visit, Jake looked at us with worried eyes and asked, "You've decided to increase it to market rate. This is a significant increase from the current $1,000. I replied firmly, "That's right. We've been undercharging for too long." Jake nodded but still looked concerned. He continued, "I'm afraid they'll be shocked when they see the new price. They're good tenants, always pay on time, and keep the house clean." Hearing Jake's words, I looked into his eyes, trying not to let emotions override reason, and replied, "If they disagree, they have the right to leave, and we'll find new tenants. You can put my phone number in the notice, so they can call me directly if they want to negotiate." Jake nodded, not asking any more questions. He could sense the seriousness in my voice. Then we filled out the necessary forms and signed. Jake promised to send the rent increase notice to my parents as soon as they finished drafting the rental adjustment notification. When we left the office, Mia squeezed my hand tight, She didn't say anything, but I could feel her support. Right after that, Mia and I hurried back to take care of Harper and prepared mentally to face the coming storm, the storm from my family. When we got home and picked up Harper, I looked at my little daughter sleeping peacefully in Mia's arms and knew I'd done the right thing. I'd do anything to protect my little family, even if it meant confronting my own family. Just as I predicted, only 2 days later, the housing brokerage office sent the notice to my parents, and they immediately contacted me using the phone number I'd left in the notice. That day, around 7 p.m., after finishing dinner, my phone suddenly rang twice, then stopped. The caller was my mother. But a few seconds later, the phone rang again, and I quickly answered. My mother's voice came from the other end without waiting for me to speak. With surprise in her voice, my mother asked, "Brandon, are you the landlord?" I took a deep breath, preparing mentally for the difficult conversation, and replied, "No, Mia is the landlord." Silence fell for a moment. Then my mother laughed bitterly. She said sarcastically, "So you've been lying to us all these years? Letting your wife make money off your own parents?" I tried to stay calm, not letting the rising anger control me, and replied, "Mom, this is a business transaction. Mia has been renting to you at way below market rate for 4 years. Now we're just adjusting the price to market rate." My mother didn't accept this explanation. She started yelling through the phone. "What are you doing? I'm your mother. Do you know that? How can you take money from us?" I didn't answer her question directly. Instead, I replied, "Mom, do you remember what you did to Harper? Do you remember what you called your granddaughter?" My mother was momentarily silent. Then she said bitterly, This is revenge. You're getting back at us for that?" Hearing my mother's question, I sighed, tired of this conversation, and replied, "No, this isn't revenge. These are consequences. Every action has consequences, Mom. You can't treat my family like that and expect everything to stay the same." Realizing the determination in my voice, my mother started pleading, her voice changing from anger to begging, "Brandon, you can't do this to us. Can we negotiate a more reasonable price? $2,500 is too much for our retirement income." I thought about this beforehand. I knew the new price would be a financial burden for my parents. But after everything they'd done, I no longer felt obligated to help them. At this point, I replied firmly, "No, Mom. The rent is $2,500, or you can find somewhere else to rent." Hearing my words, my mother started crying, trying to make me feel guilty. But I was too used to this tactic of hers. She'd always used tears to control me for years. Finally, when she saw I wasn't budging, my mother switched to accusations. She said to me, "You're so ungrateful. You're betraying your family, the people who gave birth to you and raised you." As those words rang out, I felt a strange sadness welling up. It is not anger or rage like before, but a sad acceptance. I realized that with my mother, everything always revolved around her feelings, her desires, her control. There was no room for my happiness or decisions in that equation. I understood this wasn't a battle I could win by persuading or explaining. The only thing I could do was establish clear boundaries and protect them. Protect my daughter. A few seconds after my mother's words, I replied calmly, "That's up to you. If you want to call me ungrateful or a family traitor, that's your choice. But I won't change my decision." After that call, I hung up. My mother called back several times, but I declined the calls. I didn't want to hear any more calls from them. I'd said what needed to be said, and my decision had been made. After that day's phone call, I continued to predict that my parents would come to our house looking for Mia and me. And once again, I was right. The next day, around 2 p.m., the doorbell rang, startling me. Through the security camera screen, I saw my parents standing at the door, looking tense. I sighed, knowing a confrontation was unavoidable. Luckily, my in-laws were also here, helping us care for Harper. I opened the door but stood blocking the entrance, not inviting them in. My parents seemed surprised by this attitude, but I decided to establish clear boundaries. My father spoke, trying to keep his voice calm. "Brandon, we need to talk about the rent increase." I nodded, still standing at the door, and replied, "I'm listening." My mother continued with a softer expression than the day before. "Son, we're family. Family doesn't treat each other like this." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at that statement. I looked straight into my mother's eyes and asked, "Family? Then why did you call my daughter a mistake? Is that how family treats each other?" My mother avoided my gaze, not answering the question. Instead, she took a carefully wrapped small package from her purse and said, "We brought a gift for Harper. A real gift this time." I looked at the package suspiciously, not reaching out to take it. I no longer trusted gifts from my parents after what happened at the hospital. Right then, Raymond, my father-in-law, appeared beside me. With his tall and solid stature, he stood there like a protective wall. He looked at my parents coldly and said, "I think you two should leave. My family doesn't need gifts from you." My father, not used to anyone talking to him that way, started getting angry. He stepped forward, eyes full of challenge, and asked, "Who are you to talk to me like that?" Raymond didn't flinch. With a calm but determined voice, he replied, "I won't let anyone hurt my family, including you." A heated argument began between my father and Raymond. I tried to intervene, but the situation kept getting tenser. My sister Anna also appeared from the car parked outside the gate. She ran over, yelling, "Brandon, you can't treat Mom and Dad like this." I turned to look at Anna, the sister I used to be close to, and asked, "Do you also think calling my daughter a mistake is okay, Anna?" Anna fell silent, not knowing how to answer. She'd been at the hospital that day, and she was also the one who brought out the t-shirt with the mistake written on it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I raised my voice, trying to drown out the arguing. "Enough! I want all of you to leave here right now." With angry eyes, my father looked at me and said threateningly, "You'll regret this." I wasn't afraid of that threat. I was determined to protect my family, and nothing could shake me. Finally, my parents and sister left the gift package on the front steps. I threw it in the trash without opening it to see what was inside. Standing watching them drive away, I felt a strange relief. I knew this battle wasn't over yet, but at least I'd stood firm and protected my family. 2 days after the incident, my phone started ringing constantly with calls from distant and close relatives. Aunt Carol, Uncle Mike, and Cousin Jason called to question me about kicking my parents out of the house. It turned out my parents had been telling lies. They told everyone that I was being influenced by my wife, wanting to throw my elderly parents out on the street with nowhere to go. They told everyone I wouldn't let them see their granddaughter. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, was the first to call. With a reproachful voice, she asked, "Brandon, what are you doing? How can you treat your parents like this?" Faced with my aunt's anger, I tried to stay calm and explained, "Aunt Carol, I'm not throwing them out on the street. I'm just raising the rent to market rate. They have 4 months to find another place if they don't want to pay the new price." Aunt Carol didn't accept that explanation. She continued questioning, "But why would you do that? They're your parents." I knew explaining to my aunt wouldn't get anywhere. My parents had told their version of the story, and my aunt, like most family members, would believe that version. So I didn't explain much, just quietly hung up after saying, "I'm sorry, Aunt Carol, but I have to hang up now." Then I decided to do something that would probably make my parents never forgive me. I sent all the relatives who had called me the video recording of my parents and sister giving Harper gifts at the hospital, the gift with the mistake written on it. The reaction after they watched the video was shocking silence. No one called me back for hours. Finally, Aunt Carol called back, this time with a different voice. She cried through the phone and said, "Brandon, I didn't know. I never expected them to do that. I'm sorry for doubting you." Similarly, other relatives started calling back, apologizing for misunderstanding me. They couldn't believe my parents could do such a thing to their newborn grandchild. In the following days, I received many messages from my sister Anna. She accused me of betraying the family by sharing that video with relatives. Anna's last message read, "You destroyed our family. Mom and Dad are now seen as terrible people, and it's all because of you." I read that message and decided not to reply. I wasn't the one who destroyed the family. My parents and sister's actions did that. I was just the one who showed everyone the truth. When Mia asked about the family calls, I said, "Don't worry. They know the truth now." However, I decided I wouldn't stop things easily. A week after my parents slandered me among relatives, I decided to take things all the way. Not just simply raising the rent, I wanted to ensure my parents and sister would never have the chance to hurt Harper again. After consulting with a lawyer, I decided to contact Child Protective Services to report the incident and request a restraining order from Harper until she turned 18. When I mentioned this decision to Mia, she completely supported me. With determined eyes, Mia said, "You're right. We need to do everything we can to protect Harper." I went to the CPS office on Wednesday morning to file a report. I brought the video recording of my parents giving Harper gifts at the hospital, along with other evidence of their negative behavior toward Mia and me over the years. The social worker, a woman around 40 named Sarah, reviewed the evidence seriously. When she watched the hospital video, she shook her head and said with a serious expression, "This is psychological abuse toward a newborn. We'll investigate this case." Sarah explained that CPS would visit my parents and my sister's house to investigate further. They would also get more information from hospital staff who were present that day. CPS visited my parents and my sister's house 2 days later to investigate. Right after they left, I received a message from Anna. With an angry tone, my sister wrote, "You've ruined this family. How could you call CPS to the house? They're old. Do you know this will affect their health?" I read that message and felt anger rising. Without hesitation, I texted back, "Anyone who touches my daughter, I won't let them get away with it." Then I blocked Anna's phone number. I didn't want to hear any more justifications from her. The CPS investigation lasted 2 weeks. During that time, I received many calls from unknown numbers, but didn't answer. I knew my parents or sister was trying to contact me, maybe threatening or begging me to withdraw the complaint. Finally, after a thorough investigation, the court agreed to grant a restraining order for my parents against Harper. This order strictly prohibited my parents from contacting Harper in any form until she turned 18. When I received notification of this decision, I felt like a huge burden had been lifted. Harper would be safe, wouldn't have to grow up with toxic words from her paternal grandparents. My parents then tried to contact me, calling constantly and even sending letters to my house. But I'd blocked their numbers, even changed my phone number altogether to avoid facing pleas or threats from them. In one last letter I received from them before we moved, my mother wrote that she regretted what she'd done and wanted to see Harper. But I knew those were just lies. If my parents truly regretted it, they wouldn't have spread lies about me to relatives, and they certainly would have apologized directly to Mia for calling our daughter a mistake. I folded the letter and threw it in the trash, determined that this would be the final chapter in my relationship with my parents. Harper deserved a better life, unaffected by toxicity from people who couldn't love her unconditionally. 2 months later, on a day in late November, I suggested Mia move somewhere else to live, and she agreed immediately. We felt that a fresh start in another city would help us leave all the trouble and negativity behind. As we sat in the living room discussing our moving plans, I mentioned possibly moving to Seattle or Boston, places with many job opportunities in finance. But Mia nodded and suggested, "I think we should talk to my parents before deciding." And just like that, we called Mia's parents after dinner that evening to tell them about our intention to move. After learning about our intention, Mia's parents convinced us to come to Chicago. With an excited voice, Raymond said over the phone, "Why don't you two come to Chicago? We have an empty house in the North Side area, and you can move there." Betty also enthusiastically supported this idea. She quickly added, "Exactly. That house is spacious, has a backyard for Harper to play in, and is close to good preschools. Plus, we'll be near each other to help you take care of Harper." Mia's parents' offer was really appealing. Chicago was a big city with many job opportunities in finance, and having my in-laws nearby to help with Harper was great. After careful consideration and discussion with Mia, my wife and I decided to go to Chicago. We started planning the move, looking for new jobs, and preparing everything for a fresh start. After that, I contacted the real estate brokerage office, telling them Mia's house wouldn't be for rent, and asked them to help us sell it. Jake, the broker, seemed surprised by this decision. He asked, "Are you sure you want to sell the house? The market's really good for rentals right now." I nodded, firm in my decision, and replied, "We're certain. We're moving to Chicago and don't plan to return to Miami soon." Jake didn't ask more questions. Maybe he'd heard about the troubles between me and my parents. He promised to handle all the necessary paperwork to sell the house. We were busy preparing for our new life in Chicago in the following weeks. I found a good job at a large real estate company, and Mia decided to stay home taking care of Harper for a while, at least until we'd settled into life in the new city. For me, the decision to leave Miami wasn't just a geographical change, but also a symbolic step, leaving behind a painful past and stepping into a promising new future for our little family. Christmas 2022, just 4 months after Harper was born, Mia, Harper, and I celebrated our first Christmas at Mia's parents' house in Chicago. Raymond and Betty's house was filled with Christmas atmosphere, with a large tree decorated brilliantly, wreaths hanging on doors, and the aroma of food spreading throughout the home. It was the family atmosphere I'd longed for over many years. As soon as we walked in, Betty hurried to take Harper from Mia's arms, hugged her granddaughter, and covered the little girl's cheeks with loving kisses. Raymond stood beside them, a bright smile never leaving as he looked at his granddaughter. We sat around the dining table throughout Christmas dinner, sharing happy stories, laughing, and enjoying time together. No judgment, no pressure, love and acceptance. Raymond raised his wine glass, looked into my eyes, and said with deep emotion, "Merry Christmas, Brandon. We're a family who always sticks together through tough times." Those words touched my heart. I realized this was the true meaning of family, people who love and support each other unconditionally, not people who share blood but hurt each other. Looking at Harper sleeping peacefully in Mia's arms, I knew the best decision of my life was bringing my family to a new place, away from the toxicity of my parents. That was when I knew everything would be okay, and we'd found our real home. 3 years have passed since we left Miami to start a new life in Chicago. 3 years without harassment from a toxic family. 3 years building a meaningful and happy new life. I last heard news about them from my cousin Jason 3 months ago. I had an important meeting with a partner at a coffee shop that day. I happened to run into Jason there. After I finished my business, Jason suggested we have lunch together, and I agreed. Jason told me that my parents' recent situation hasn't been good. They'd moved to a suburban area with cheap rent. Their lives had seriously declined. No more house parties or luxurious trips like before. My father had to postpone retirement plans and work overtime to cover living expenses. According to Jason, my mother seemed to have aged a lot in the past 3 years. In family gatherings, Jason revealed they'd expressed regret while still trying to find ways to contact me. My mother often mentioned Harper and me, but didn't know how to reach out after I'd blocked all communication channels. As for Anna, my sister, she'd married an engineer named Michael. Jason said the wedding was quite simple, and Anna's saddest thing was not having my family attend the wedding. Hearing what Jason told me, I felt a bit sad. I am not sorry about missing or regretting them, but sad because I realized things had come to this point. After all, those people were still my blood family. When we were about to say goodbye, Jason looked at me hopefully and asked, "Brandon, can I get your phone number so I can invite you to lunch next time?" I took a few seconds to think, weighing between maintaining contact with Jason, the only relative I felt comfortable talking to, and the risk of reopening the door to my old family. Finally, I replied, "Sorry, Jason. If we accidentally meet, I'd invite you to eat. Right now, I don't want any contact with the family." Jason said softly to me, his voice full of understanding, "Brandon, if you can forgive them, please forgive them." I just smiled and didn't reply, because even if I spoke, Jason couldn't understand. This wasn't just about forgiveness. This was about protecting Harper, my daughter, not letting her be exposed to people who called her a mistake from the very first day she was born. Driving home that day, I thought a lot. Maybe someday, when Harper's old enough, I'll tell her about her paternal grandparents and Aunt Anna. But right now, I don't want to take risks. My daughter's happiness and mental safety are top priority, and I won't let anyone hurt her, no matter who they are. I'm still happy with my current life, with the care and attention from my in-laws, who've become our real family. Harper, our 3-year-old daughter, is growing up healthy and happy. She's intelligent, mischievous, and full of energy. Watching Harper run around in the backyard every day, laughing and playing with her maternal grandparents, I'm more convinced I did the right thing. Mia has also started her new job at a law firm in Chicago, and she's very successful. We bought a small house near her parents' house, and every weekend, we gather together for family meals. My current life is very peaceful and happy. Through my story, I want to share that sometimes the most complex decisions are necessary. Not all family relationships are healthy, and cutting ties with toxic people, even when they're relatives, might be required to protect yourself and those you love. If you're facing toxicity from family, remember that you have the right to set boundaries and protect your peace. Family isn't just people who share blood and respect, love, and support you unconditionally. I'm not advising you to act like I did. Every situation is different, and everyone has their own limits. But I recommend that you listen to your intuition and put your mental health and your children's first. And if you decide that cutting contact is necessary, don't let guilt or social pressure make you doubt your decision. Sometimes distance is the best gift you can give yourself and those you love. However, when new people ask about my parents, about the family where I was born and raised, I tell them what happened about my decision. Some people who hear the story support me, saying I did right in protecting my wife and daughter. But a few say I was wrong. They think my parents gave birth to me, and I should forgive them no matter what they did. So I don't regret my decision. I chose to protect my little family and choose a better future for my daughter, and that's what matters most. What about you? What do you think about my decision? If I were you, what would I do in this situation? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts. If the story touches you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this long story.